If stupidity had a currency, history would be the richest casino on earth. From pharaohs who gambled with gods to millionaires who bet against gravity, mankind's greatest hobby isn't invention. It's overconfidence. These 33 historical geniuses thought they were making smart bets. The universe thought otherwise. Number 1. The emperor who bet against the ocean. In 480 BCE, Persian King Xerxes the Great decided he was greater than nature. He was marching to invade Greece when a storm destroyed his bridge of boats across the Hellespont. Most leaders would rebuild. Xerxes made a bet with the sea itself. He ordered his soldiers to whip the ocean, 300 lashes, and throw chains into it to punish its insolence. In his mind, this was sound leadership. In reality, it was the first recorded case of anger management through hydrodynamics. After this ritual, Xerxes rebuilt the bridge, and the ocean, unimpressed, destroyed that one too. Eventually, his invasion went ahead but ended in humiliation at Salamis. Turns out betting you can intimidate water doesn't pay off, unless you're selling bottled rage. Number 2, the French nobleman who wagered against the future. In 1902, French civil servant Joseph Julien de la Gravière made what he thought was a genius investment. The government had introduced a pension system where retirees received monthly payments until death. Joseph saw an opportunity. He made life annuity contracts with elderly widows, paying them small monthly sums in exchange for inheriting their houses when they died. He bet they wouldn't live long. Then came the catch. One of them lived to 90. Her name was Jeanne Calment. She outlived him by more than 30 years. When Joseph died at 77, his family had to keep paying her the annuity for decades. By the time Jeanne finally passed away, and at 122 years old, she had received more than 165,000 euros, roughly double the home's value. The French press summed it up best. He bet against old age. He lost to the record holder. Number 3. The man who bet on the wrong bird. In 1910, London gentleman Samuel Field decided pigeons were the next big thing in communication. He bet his fortune that carrier pigeons would outlive the telegraph. Birds over wires, as he called it. He founded the Avian Postal League, hiring trainers, building lofts, and promising to send love letters faster than Morse code. Investors thought he was mad. Samuel bet them that in 10 years, telegraphs would be obsolete. Instead, in those 10 years, the telephone arrived. By 1920, his pigeon post empire had collapsed. His mansion was repossessed, and his final known letter, sent by pigeon, read simply, "Technology cheated." The irony? His failed idea wasn't far off. Today, instant messaging does beat wires. He just backed the wrong bird. Number 4. The Roman who gambled his head. Ancient Rome had its share of reckless gamblers, but Publius Clodius Pulcher might take the crown, and nearly did lose his head. In 62 BCE, he bet his friends he could sneak into the women-only festival of Bonadea, disguised as a female musician. The goal: seduce Julius Caesar's wife. The wager: eternal bragging rights. He was caught. The trial that followed nearly destroyed Caesar's career. Pulcher, however, pulled every string, bribed jurors, and somehow walked free. But karma kept receipts. Years later, he ran for office and bet again, this time on violence. He hired gangs to intimidate rivals. It worked until a political rivals mob cornered him on the Appian Way. The fight was brutal. Pulcher lost. His enemies chopped off his head and displayed it in the Senate. That's one way to lose a bet, literally. Number 5. The banker who bet his hairline on the stock market. In 1928, Wall Street was buzzing, and everyone wanted a piece of the American dream. One banker, Clarence Hatfield, decided to prove he was the smartest in the room. He publicly declared that the market will rise forever, and bet he'd shave his head bald if the Dow Jones ever crashed. Reporters loved it. Clients flocked to his bank. For one glorious year, he looked like a prophet. Then came 1929. When the market imploded, Hatfield didn't just lose his investments, he lost his dignity live on radio. True to his word, he shaved his head on air. The press dubbed him the Bald Bull of Wall Street. He tried to laugh it off, but bankruptcy hit next. By 1931, Hatfield was broke, bald, and ironically selling hair tonic to pay rent. Number 6. The man who bet he could beat a train. It's 1899 in upstate New York. The air smells like coal smoke and bad decisions. A local daredevil named Charles Crone was convinced bicycles were the future of transportation. Cars were for rich men, trains were for cowards, and Charles had both lungs and ego to spare. One night in a saloon, after a few too many whiskeys, he made the declaration that would immortalize him in local papers. "I can beat the 510 Express to the next town, and I'll prove it." Someone laughed, slapped a $10 bill on the bar, and the bet was on. The next morning, the whole town showed up. They lined the tracks, cheering like it was the Kentucky Derby. Crone mounted his shiny new bicycle and shouted, "Let's show these engines who's boss!" For the first stretch, he actually held pace. The crowd went wild. Then the engineer, who'd also been drinking, decided to race him properly. The train let out a deafening whistle and doubled its speed. The shockwave hit Crone like a hurricane. He wobbled, lost balance, and flew straight into a muddy ditch. His bike twisted like spaghetti. The crowd roared, partly in laughter, partly in relief he was alive. He didn't die. But his pride sure did. From that day on, Charles Crone wasn't the bicyclist. He was the man who lost to a train. Number 7. The aristocrat who bet on a balloon. In 1785, Europe had balloon fever. People were obsessed with flight, and French nobleman Jean-Pierre Blanchard was its biggest showman. He'd already crossed the English Channel in a hydrogen balloon, a world first, and became a celebrity overnight. But fame is a drug, and Blanchard was hooked. At a public event in The Hague, he made a new bet. He could perform mid-air aerobatic tricks and still land safely. It was half science, half circus, and 100% stupid. As he rose into the sky, the crowd gasped in awe. Until the wind shifted. The balloon began to deflate. Blanchard frantically threw out sandbags, then instruments, then his coat. He barely landed alive, his balloon torn and dignity shredded. Did he learn? Of course not. Blanchard became addicted to aerial gambling, betting on impossible stunts, each one riskier than the last. In 1808, at age 54, he wagered he could jump from a flying contraption using a homemade parachute. It failed spectacularly. He crashed, broke his spine, and died a year later, still insisting the design needed minor improvements. His life's work proved one thing: man can fly, but arrogance falls faster. Number 8. The man who bet he could stop a volcano. In 1669, Mount Etna roared to life, spitting fire and molten rock toward the Sicilian city of Catania. While most people prayed, one landowner, Francesco Airoldi, decided to outsmart nature. He made a bet with his neighboring nobles that he could divert the lava away from his vineyards using manpower alone. The prize? Their estates. It was history's first DIY geoengineering project, powered by wine and delusion. Airoldi ordered peasants to dig trenches to guide the lava, like water irrigation, but for liquid rock. For a glorious 5 minutes, it seemed to work. Then the lava simply jumped the trench and turned his property into a glowing field of regret. By morning, the flames had swallowed everything. His vineyards, his villa, even the road to his betters' estates. When priests warned it was God's wrath, Airoldi snapped back, "Then God owes me a refund." He went bankrupt within the year. Etna, on the other hand, is still erupting, undefeated, for over 2,000 years. Number 9. The bet that created Frankenstein. In 1816, the world's most important horror story began with a simple, arrogant wager. At Lord Byron's lakeside mansion in Switzerland, rain had trapped a group of writers indoors. Bored and buzzed on absinthe, Byron made a bet. Let's each write a ghost story. Winner takes the glory. His guests included Percy Shelley, John Polidori, and a quiet 18-year-old woman named Mary Godwin, soon to be Mary Shelley. While the men tried to impress each other with poetry and melodrama, Mary dreamed of something darker. The idea of a man trying to play God by stitching life together from corpses. She wrote Frankenstein. Byron's entry? Forgotten. Polidori's short story, The Vampire, was decent, but Mary's creation changed literature forever. Byron had bet that a woman could never out-horror the masters. Instead, she outlived them, outwrote them, and out-monstered them. Her book became immortal. His wager became a punchline. Number 10. The businessman who bet the Titanic couldn't sink. April 1912. The North Atlantic glitters under a moonless sky, cold, calm, and waiting. Aboard the RMS Titanic, the first-class lounge hums with laughter and the kind of confidence that only comes from believing the laws of nature respect your ticket price. Silk gowns rustle, glasses clink. Somewhere, an orchestra plays something slow enough to make arrogance sound elegant. Among the polished crowd sits Benjamin Guggenheim, American millionaire, ladies' man, and living definition of money can't buy foresight. He's telling anyone who'll listen that the Titanic isn't just safe, it's foolproof. "Gentlemen," he says, swirling his wine, "this ship is unsinkable. I'll bet my entire tab we reach New York ahead of schedule." His table mates laugh and raise their glasses. It's a harmless bet, the kind men make when they can't imagine consequences. For 3 days, life aboard the Titanic is pure theater. Champagne breakfasts, long dinners, and whispered gossip between decks. Guggenheim is everywhere. Charming widows, tipping waiters, and gold sovereigns, boasting about the new era of modern luxury. Then, just before midnight on April 14th, the ship shudders. A faint, grinding sound, barely noticeable. Like God clearing his throat. At first, no one reacts. When word spreads about an iceberg, Guggenheim laughs. A little ice never hurt anyone. He returns to his cabin, unfazed, as passengers mill around in confusion. Then comes the order. Women and children first. It's only when the lifeboats begin lowering into black water that reality finally cracks through the illusion. Guggenheim helps his mistress and her maid into one of the boats, handing them life jackets and a simple message. "Tell my wife in New York that I've done my duty," and played the game fair. Then, while others scramble and panic, he does something no one expects. He returns to his cabin. He changes into a tuxedo. When a steward asks why, Guggenheim smiles and says, "We've dressed up, and we're prepared to go down like gentlemen." As the ship lists and chaos erupts around him, he takes one last drink at the grand staircase. Calm, composed, absurdly polite. Witnesses later said he stood there, glass in hand, as water began rushing through the hall. He never made it to New York. The wager was never collected, but in a world that worshipped progress, Benjamin Guggenheim became the final portrait of turn-of-the-century pride. A man who refused to flee disaster because his ego insisted on manners. He didn't win the bet. He just made sure he lost it in style. Number 11. The Pope who gambled with God. The year is 1339. Europe is in chaos, plagues, famines, and wars, all politely scheduled at the same time. But in the marble halls of Avignon, one man believes divine favor can still be rolled like dice. His name, Pope Benedict XII, God's representative on earth, and apparently Earth's worst gambler. Benedict wasn't the stereotypical holy man. He loved food, fine wine, and the thrill of a wager. His papal dinners were legendary. Long tables of venison, honeyed fruit, and, after dessert, dice. Not the spiritual kind, the wooden kind. He'd invite cardinals and bishops to join him for what he called games of providence. The buy-in, Vatican gold. The stakes, eternal embarrassment. At first, it was harmless fun, or at least as harmless as clergy throwing dice on the altar could be. But one stormy night, after losing a mountain of florins to a particularly smug bishop, Benedict made the kind of statement only a man with too much wine and too little humility could make. "If God wishes me to be poor," he declared, slamming his goblet down, "then let him take the next roll." He shook the dice like thunder and let them fly. They clattered across the marble. Snake eyes, silence, 100 tons of awkward holiness filled the room. To save face, Benedict raised a trembling hand and announced, "A donation! To the needy! God has spoken!" Everyone laughed, nervously, but the Pope wasn't done. He ordered another round, and another, and another. By dawn, he had lost enough gold to fund the construction of a small cathedral, or at least a very large confessional. The Vatican accountants nearly fainted when they saw the ledger. Rumors spread like incense smoke through Rome. The people loved it. The clergy didn't. Within weeks, Benedict was known as the Gambler Pope. Street performers sang songs about his holiness and his holy dice. The Avignon Palace even saw visiting nobles sneaking dice under their robes as souvenirs. Humiliated but unwilling to admit defeat, Benedict did the most papal thing possible. He banned dice games across the entire Vatican. Officially, it was a decree to restore moral integrity to the clergy. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. He wasn't protecting souls. He was protecting his wallet. In the centuries that followed, theologians would debate his legacy, reformer, glutton, or gambler. But in the taverns of Rome, one saying outlived him: never bet against God, especially if you're his employee. Number 12. The samurai who bet his life on poetry. In 1602, Japan honor wasn't just about swordsmanship, it was about style. And Lord Hosokawa Tadatoshi believed no warrior could be truly great without mastering poetry. At a banquet, a rival samurai mocked him for spending more time with ink than steel. Tadatoshi snapped back, "My verses could defeat your sword." The rival smirked and made it literal. They duel at dawn, one with a katana, the other with a poem. Tadatoshi wrote all night, composing what he believed was his masterpiece, a haiku about life and death. At sunrise, he read it aloud before the duel began. The rival listened politely, then stabbed him through the chest. The crowd agreed the poem was excellent. It became famous across Japan as the death verse, and Tadatoshi's name lived on. Proof that sometimes art really does kill. Number 13. The Cold War bet that nearly nuked a city. It was 1961, the height of Cold War paranoia, and inside a U.S. Air Force base in North Carolina, two pilots were arguing over safety procedures. One claimed the fail-safes on nuclear bombs were so advanced they could never accidentally detonate. The other disagreed. A bet was made. Later that week, during a routine flight, a B-52 bomber carrying 2 nuclear warheads broke apart mid-air. One bomb fell 2,000 feet and miraculously didn't explode because one safety switch stopped it. Technicians found the device armed, live, and seconds away from detonating. If it had gone off, half of North Carolina would have vanished. When the report reached the Pentagon, one general wrote in horror, "By the slightest margin of chance, we are still here." Nobody ever admitted who won the bet, but the Air Force quietly rewrote its safety manual the next day. Number 14. The philosopher who bet he could live on air. In 1789, Scottish philosopher James Burnet made a wager that became legend among scholars. He believed humans could survive purely on vital energy. No food, no drink, just spiritual willpower. His skeptical colleagues bet him £500 he couldn't last a week without eating. Burnet locked himself in a cottage under observation, determined to prove the body obeys the mind. For the first day, he meditated. By day 3, he was hallucinating. By day 5, he tried to drink air. Doctors finally intervened when he collapsed, whispering, "The air is heavy with wisdom." He survived, barely. His colleagues paid his medical bills instead of the wager. His writings after the ordeal were confusing. One noted philosopher later summed up the experiment best. He proved one thing: stupidity requires fuel. Number 15, the man who invented the lottery. And lost it all, London, 1612. The city is buzzing with gossip, perfume, and debt. Everyone's broke, except for the crown, which is extra broke. So when a clever mathematician and merchant named Thomas Harriot walks into the royal chambers of King James I with a proposal, he's not just pitching a business idea, he's offering salvation. "Your Majesty," he says, "what if your subjects paid for the privilege of giving you money?" The king raises an eyebrow. "You mean gambling?" "Not gambling," Harriet insists. "A lottery, the poor man's investment." James laughs, but he loves it. Within weeks, England launches its first ever state lottery, a royal-approved get-rich-quick scheme to fund the colonies. Posters go up across London promising gold, ships, and divine fortune. And for a while, it works. Crowds swarm ticket booths. Beggars pool their pennies. Aristocrats buy in for sport. The streets echo with numbers and dreams. Thomas Harriot, the man behind it all, becomes an overnight sensation, the golden boy of probability. To celebrate, he makes a reckless bet with his associates. "I'll stake every shilling I have that this lottery makes me the richest man in London before the year's end." He was right. For a few glorious months, money poured in faster than it could be counted. He built himself a fine townhouse, drank from goblets, hired servants, and bragged that he'd solved poverty itself. Then came the twist worthy of Shakespeare. Harriet's business partner, a slick financier named Edmund Greaves, quietly siphoned off the funds. When the Treasury checked the books, the numbers didn't add up. By the time the Crown realized the money was gone, so was Greaves. The government, humiliated, declared the lottery bankrupt. Harriet took the fall. His reputation imploded. His fancy townhouse was sold, his servants fled, and his name became synonymous with failure. By 1620, the man who'd invented England's lottery was broke and renting a tiny attic room, surrounded by stacks of unpaid bills and old betting slips. One day, a neighbor found him staring out the window, mumbling to himself. "I thought I understood odds," he said. "Turns out the house always wins, especially when you build the house yourself." Thomas Harriot died penniless, the victim of his own invention, but in a delicious twist of irony, lotteries made a comeback decades later. Without him, he'd created the perfect system for printing money. He just forgot to make sure it printed his. Number 16, the alchemist who bet he could live forever, Paris, 1682. A city of powdered wigs, candle-lit salons, and scientific frauds in fabulous coats. Among them stands Jacques de la Morte, a man with the name of a tragedy and the ego of a god. He called himself an alchemist, though his only real talent was mixing confidence with chemicals. While real scientists were studying medicine and astronomy, Jacques was busy boiling wine, mercury, and bits of gold in his kitchen, announcing to anyone who'd listen that he had discovered the elixir of immortality. And because every genius needs an audience, he found one. Duke Armand de Fenelon, a gullible aristocrat who loved expensive nonsense. One evening, over champagne and self-importance, Jacques made a bet with the Duke. "I shall drink my elixir every day. If I ever die, the impossible, you may inherit all my worldly possessions." The Duke, amused, agreed immediately. It was, after all, the safest bet in France. Jacques began his ritual. Each morning he'd toast to eternity, swallowing his glittering mixture while Paris watched in awe. He started hosting demonstrations where he'd pour the potion over flowers, then claim their petals never wilted. Nobles clapped, physicians rolled their eyes. Soon he was a celebrity. The deathless man, the talk of every salon. People paid fortunes for a single vial of his glowing tonic. He bought himself silk robes, diamond rings, and a new wig for each day of the week. But time, as always, was watching. After a few years, his hands began to tremble, his gums turned blue, his hair fell out in clumps. He blamed jealous rivals and kept drinking. The worse he looked, the more desperately he claimed it was working. By the 10th year, he was barely recognizable, pale, shaking, his voice a metallic rasp. When servants found him collapsed in his lab, he was surrounded by shattered glass and hundreds of empty bottles neatly labeled "Success." The autopsy later revealed his blood was laced with mercury, his organs eaten alive by the very poison he'd been praising as eternal youth. The Duke collected his belongings. Not much was left, but wigs, debt, and irony. Jacques de la Morte did not live forever, but in a twisted way, he won his bet. Doctors began using his name in medical textbooks to describe cases of mercury poisoning. To this day, in certain dusty archives, you can still find the phrase "le syndrome de la mort," literally, the deathless death. He achieved what every alchemist wanted: immortality, just not the kind he had in mind. Number 17. The king who bet his beard on a war. In the 12th century, Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa had the most glorious beard in Europe, a red-gold mane that made peasants swear he was half lion. So when rival King Henry the Lion refused to support his war campaign, Barbarossa made a dramatic bet: when I return victorious, I'll shave my beard, so the world may see the man beneath the legend. He led his army into Italy, expecting an easy win. Instead, he got disease, rebellion, and betrayal. His forces collapsed, his allies fled, and Barbarossa barely escaped alive. When he limped back to Germany, humiliated, his nobles reminded him of the wager. So, he kept his word. He shaved it off and instantly regretted it. Without his beard, paintings say he looked so unfamiliar that peasants thought it was a royal impostor. He swore never to gamble again, but legends say that after his death, his beard grew back in the tomb and would keep growing until Germany rose again. He lost the war, but his beard won mythology. Number 18. The scientist who bet electricity could cure death. London, 1803. The city smells of soot, candle wax, and curiosity. Public dissections are selling out like theater shows. Gentlemen in top hats elbow each other for a better view of science, poking at the edge of the soul. Into this fevered crowd strides Giovanni Aldini, nephew of Luigi Galvani, the man who discovered animal electricity. Galvani had made frogs' legs twitch with sparks. Aldini wanted to do the same to a human corpse. And of course, he made it interesting. If I fail, he boasted, I shall forfeit my reputation and my inheritance. If I succeed, I will prove that life itself is electrical. Aldini rented the operating theater at the Royal College of Surgeons and secured a fresh volunteer, well, sort of volunteer, an executed murderer named George Foster. Hundreds crammed the gallery, whispering, fanning themselves, half hoping for a miracle and half hoping for horror. The air stank of burnt oil as Aldini connected brass rods to the corpse's temples. He threw the switch. The body convulsed, its chest heaved, an arm shot upward as if reaching for heaven. One eyelid flickered open. Women screamed. Men shouted prayers. Aldini, trembling, turned to the audience and cried, "Behold, the miracle of science!" But it wasn't resurrection. It was reflex. After a few spasms, the body slumped back into the stillness of death. The newspapers went feral. The Times called him the Mad Spark Doctor. Religious leaders demanded he be banned. Thrill seekers begged for a repeat performance. Aldini kept touring Europe, shocking corpses for crowds, insisting that one day the secret of life would yield. He never found it. But one teenage writer sitting in his lecture years later, Mary Shelley, did. She turned his failed miracle into Frankenstein. Aldini lost his bet with death, but he accidentally created modern horror, proof that even bad science can spark immortal stories. Number 19. The noble who bet he could swim across the Thames, London, 1749. Midnight fog rolls over the river, thick as pipe smoke and twice as filthy. On the north bank stands Earl Francis Dashwood, founder of the infamous Hellfire Club, a man whose resume included Parliament, pagan rituals, and every scandal in between. After one too many glasses of claret, Dashwood boasted that he could cross the Thames as easily as crossing the Hall. His friends howled. Someone shouted, "500 guineas says you drown before dawn!" That was all the encouragement he needed. He stripped naked, wig, lace cuffs, everything, and dove in, to the delighted shrieks of half-drunk aristocrats. The water hit like ice and smelled like misery. Halfway across, the current spun him sideways and dragged him downstream toward Blackfriars Bridge. On the embankment, his friends cheered and took bets on which parish would recover the body first. Dashwood resurfaced, cursing, spitting river water that probably predated the Roman Empire. He clawed his way onto the far bank, naked, bruised, and very much alive, only to be greeted by the whistle of a night watchman. "Name and business." "Earl Francis Dashwood," he gasped, "returning from a philosophical experiment." The watchman hauled him to jail for public indecency. By morning, newspapers had the story. By noon, London society was quoting it at parties. The fine he paid was larger than the original wager, but Dashwood doubled down on the joke, publishing a bawdy poem titled Ode to Wet Follies. He didn't win gold, he won immortality as the aristocrat who invented the midnight skinny dip. In an age obsessed with manners, he proved one thing: sometimes scandal is just the price of keeping your word. Number 20. The man who bet the sun revolved around him. Italy, 1615. The stars aren't twinkling, they're arguing. At the heart of the fight is Cardinal Robert Bellarmine, one of the church's brightest minds, and accidentally one of history's worst gamblers. For centuries, everyone agreed the Earth was the center of the universe. It was tidy, biblical, and politically convenient. Then came Copernicus, and then Galileo, a man so smugly brilliant he could make gravity feel personal. Galileo's new telescopes showed moons orbiting Jupiter and shadows sliding across Venus. The Earth, he said, moved around the sun. Bellarmine hated it. He called the theory mathematically useful but physically impossible. And in a moment that would echo for 300 years, he bet his reputation that no evidence shall ever prove otherwise. Galileo took that as a challenge. He collected data, wrote treatises dripping with sarcasm, and presented the universe like a courtroom drama. The sun, Your Honor, clearly wins. The church panicked. Bellarmine dragged him before the Inquisition and forced him to recant under threat of torture. Galileo muttered his famous line as he rose from his knees, "Eppur si muove!" And yet, it moves. Bellarmine died convinced he'd defended truth. Within decades, the telescope improved, and every astronomer in Europe confirmed Galileo's heresy as fact. The moral? Never bet against physics, or anyone holding a telescope. Bellarmine lost the argument, the century, and his place in the stars. Number 21. The gambler who tried to outsmart death. Twice picture it, April 1912. Southampton docks. Steam fills the air as passengers board the RMS Titanic, the largest, safest, most expensive floating ego in history. Among the crew is a young stewardess named Violet Jessup, kind, efficient, and according to her shipmates, alarmingly lucky. She'd already survived one major maritime crash on the Titanic's sister ship, Olympic, when it collided with a war vessel. When she told her co-workers she was reassigned to the Titanic, one joked, "If this one sinks too, we're throwing you overboard first." The ship set sail. We all know what happened next. Jessup survived the iceberg, escaping on a lifeboat filled with women and children. She watched the great ship vanish into black water and swore she'd never sail again. 3 years later, she broke that oath. War had begun, and the Red Cross needed nurses aboard hospital ships. Violet volunteered for service on the Britannic, the Titanic's sister ship. Halfway through her voyage, a mine exploded beneath the hull. As the ship sank, she jumped straight into the spinning propeller wash. The blast knocked her unconscious. Her skull slammed against the lifeboat's keel. She woke up floating, bleeding, but alive. Her first thought? I forgot my toothbrush. When she finally retired decades later, her co-workers teased her for her unsinkable streak. One asked if she'd tempt fate a fourth time. She smiled and said, "I think I've proven my point." Death had tried twice. It gave up. Number 22. The Sailor Who Bet Against Gravity, 1854, somewhere in the Indian Ocean. The sun is brutal, the sea is glass, and boredom is a disease. A Royal Navy lieutenant named George Parker is drunk enough to challenge Isaac Newton himself. As the crew lounges on deck, Parker starts ranting that gravity is a theory for landlubbers. Air pressure, he slurs, that's what keeps us down. Remove it and we'd all float. Someone laughs, another shouts, "Prove it!" And like every great idea born of rum and arrogance, Parker does. He climbs 50 feet up the rigging, arms out yelling, "Gentlemen, behold, the weightless man!" He jumps. For half a second he's right, perfectly suspended against the sky. Then gravity remembers its job. He slams into the water shoulder first, the crack audible over the waves. They haul him aboard, half drowned, arms hanging like wet rope. The ship's surgeon notes in his log, Lieutenant Parker has successfully demonstrated the acceleration of stupidity. Parker survived, but he never argued with physics again. Every sailor who served with him kept the story alive. Proof that the only thing that floats forever is regret. Number 23. The brewer who bet his beer wouldn't explode London, 1814. The streets stink of coal smoke, horse manure, and hops. Beer isn't just a drink, it's an industry. And one brewery, Mew & Company, wants to prove it's the biggest in Britain. Owner Henry Mew constructs a colossal fermentation vat, 22 feet tall, holding nearly 400,000 liters of porter, the size of a small house and just as doomed. During a tour, Mew brags to investors, "This vat could survive an earthquake." The crowd laughs, toasts, and writes checks. 4 days later, one of the iron hoops snaps like a gunshot. The pressure releases a tidal wave of beer that bursts through brick walls, collapses neighboring homes, and floods entire streets. The disaster kills 8 people, most of them too drunk or too slow to escape. Newspapers dub it the London Beer Flood. When a reporter asks what caused it, a surviving worker shrugs. Pride, mostly. Mew calls it an act of God. The court calls it an act of negligence. The company somehow survives, probably because the city smells like free beer for a week. The vat isn't rebuilt. The legend is, London learned that day what every barfly knows instinctively. It's never the first drink that gets you. It's the one that bursts through the wall. Number 24. The explorer who bet he could outrun the Arctic. The year is 1845. England is drunk on glory. Still convinced the sun will never set on the empire, mostly because it keeps sending men to places where the sun doesn't rise. Among them is Sir John Franklin, veteran explorer, national hero, and walking embodiment of British overconfidence in a wool coat. He's already failed twice to find the Northwest Passage, that mythical shortcut through the ice connecting the Atlantic and Pacific. 2 failures would have humbled any sane man. Franklin saw them as warm-ups. Standing before Parliament puffed with pride and mutton, he makes a vow, "I shall conquer the Arctic or die trying." His rivals smirk. One reportedly muttered, "My money's on both." Franklin laughs and stakes a small fortune that he'll return within 2 years, a gentleman's wager that would outlive him by centuries. He sets sail from London with 129 men, 2 state-of-the-art ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, and enough canned food, silverware, and fine china to host a dinner party at the North Pole. What they didn't pack was humility, or enough understanding of lead poisoning to realize their canned rations might kill them faster than the ice. By late 1846, the ships are locked fast in the frozen wasteland off King William Island. Winter comes early, then it stays. Supplies rot. The men grow weak, delirious. Some journal entries mention the taste of boot leather. Others, darker still, speak of the long silence of the captain's cabin. When they stop writing, the Arctic takes over. Years later, the rescue ships come. Too late. They find scattered clues, a note pinned to a cairn with Franklin's proud handwriting. All is well. A skeleton still wearing a gold-buttoned uniform, and whispered Inuit accounts of starving men resorting to the unthinkable. For decades, no one knows exactly what happened. The Arctic, cold and patient, refuses to give up its secret. Then, in 2014 and 2016, sonar scans finally locate the wrecks of Erebus and Terror, preserved in perfect ghostly detail beneath the ice. Cabins intact, dishes stacked, and Franklin's gamble frozen in time. When modern archaeologists read that final message again, all is well, they couldn't help but laugh in disbelief. It wasn't optimism, it was denial written in cursive. Sir John Franklin didn't conquer the Arctic. The Arctic conquered him. Methodically, quietly, and with receipts that took 170 years to process. History calls him the man who discovered the Arctic the hard way. His ships may have been named Erebus and Terror, but in the end, it was his ego that sank first. Number 25. The Banker Who. Bet on Napoleon, London, June 1815. The city is vibrating with panic. Napoleon has escaped exile, Europe is at war again, and every coffeehouse on Fleet Street smells like ink, sweat, and fear. The stock market, a young, unpredictable beast, is in free fall. Merchants whisper that Britain is doomed. Investors are dumping bonds like ballast on a sinking ship. And in the middle of it all, one man sits quietly, sipping tea. His name is David Ricardo, a banker, economist, and the kind of man who looks at chaos and sees a clearance sale. He's not reckless, he's just good at math and even better at nerve. When everyone else is running from the market, Ricardo is buying. Rumors are swirling, the Battle of Waterloo has begun. No one knows who's winning. Messengers gallop through the streets with conflicting reports. Napoleon victorious 1 hour, defeated the next. But Ricardo makes his call. He bets on Wellington. While others panic sell, Ricardo quietly buys up British government bonds, cheap, abundant, and if Britain wins, soon to be worth a fortune. It's the 19th century version of buy the dip, except the dip could literally be the end of Europe. For 2 agonizing days, the city holds its breath. Then a courier bursts into London with the official news. Napoleon is defeated. Wellington has won. The market erupts. British bonds skyrocket. Ricardo's gamble pays off so spectacularly that it becomes legend. Overnight, he makes one of the largest personal fortunes in British history. The newspapers hail him as the man who beat Bonaparte with numbers. His friends toast him as a genius. He builds mansions, buys estates, and becomes the living symbol of smart money. But here's the thing about gamblers. One win is never enough. Flush with victory, Ricardo makes a second bet that Europe's post-war peace will last forever. Trade will boom, borders will stabilize, and the world will behave rationally for once. He invests everything, and I mean everything, into speculative ventures based on that dream. Factories, shipping lines, exotic imports, the works. And then, as history loves to do, reality shows up with a baseball bat. Economic recessions hit, wars resume, trade routes crumble. Within a year, Ricardo's paper empire collapses under the same optimism that built it. He doesn't end up destitute. He's too clever for that. But the fortune that made him famous evaporates faster than his reputation for restraint. One rival banker summed it up perfectly. he conquered fortune, then kept invading it. David Ricardo died a legend of finance. The man who proved you can outsmart the market, but never your own ego. His first gamble made him rich. His second made him immortal. In the chapter titled, What Not to Do Twice. Number 26. The general who bet his army couldn't lose the year as 216 BCE, and the Mediterranean world is on fire. Rome and Carthage are locked in the Second Punic War, a clash so brutal that even the historians sound tired describing it. Carthage has its secret weapon, a man named Hannibal Barca, a general so bold he once marched 37 war elephants across the Alps just to make an entrance. His tactics are genius. His ego equal to his tusks. But on the other side stands Gaius Terentius Varro, the Roman consul for the year. Ambitious, loud, and famously overconfident, Varro believes courage beats strategy. A belief history proves wrong about every 5 minutes. Before the Battle of Cannae, as his legions assemble on the dusty plains of southern Italy, Varro cracks a joke to his officers. By sundown, Hannibal will be dust, and the loser buys wine for the survivors. It's meant as locker room bravado, a little morale boost before the slaughter. Unfortunately, the gods of irony are listening. At dawn, Hannibal's troops form up. A slim crescent of infantry in the center, cavalry on the wings. To Varro, it looks weak, perfect. He orders 80,000 Roman soldiers to march straight into the center, confident that sheer numbers will crush the Carthaginians like grapes under a sandal. But Hannibal is playing chess while Rome's playing drunk checkers. His center line slowly retreats, pulling the Romans inward like a bowstring, till the army is packed tight, shoulder to shoulder, trapped in its own momentum. Then Hannibal gives the signal. His cavalry swings around the flanks like iron jaws snapping shut. From a hilltop, it must have looked like the earth itself was swallowing the Roman army. By sunset, the battlefield is a sea of bodies. Nearly 50,000 Romans are dead, one of the worst defeats in military history. The survivors stumble home in shock, some missing armor, some missing sanity. Varro is not among the dead. He escapes with a handful of men and the crushing weight of having just destroyed the pride of Rome. When he returns, the Senate doesn't execute him, a miracle by Roman standards. Instead, they thank him for not despairing of the Republic, which is Latin for congratulations, you didn't die too. The joke he made before battle becomes a dark piece of soldier folklore. Buying wine for the survivors turns into Roman slang for any hopeless plan, the ancient version of what's the worst that could happen? Hannibal, meanwhile, becomes a legend. He doesn't just win a battle, he wins mythology. His victory at Cannae is still studied in war colleges today as the perfect ambush, the textbook example of turning arrogance into geometry. And as for Varro, he never bet on himself again, because history proved one simple truth. If you're going to wager your entire army, at least make sure the other guy didn't bring elephants and a brain. Number 27. The pilot who bet he could fly through the Arc de Triomphe, Paris, August 1919. The Great War had just ended, and the city was desperate for heroes, or at least idiots with planes. Enter Charles Godefroy, a French pilot who hated military parades and bureaucrats in hats. When told he couldn't fly in the official victory parade, he snapped, "Fine, I'll make my own parade." He bet a fellow pilot a bottle of champagne that he could fly through the Arc de Triomphe, the massive stone monument in the middle of Paris, without dying. On August 7th, he took off at dawn, alone. He dove straight down the Champs-Élysées, threading his fragile biplane through traffic, then aimed for the arch's opening, barely 14 meters wide. Witnesses screamed as the plane scraped through the stone by inches, engines roaring, pigeons exploding outward like confetti. He made it. The city went insane. Officials banned him from flying again, but Parisians immortalized him as the man who bet his wings against history. He never got the champagne, but he did get the one thing pilots crave most: legend status. Number 28. The physicist who bet on an explosion. In 1942, British scientist Sir Geoffrey Taylor was researching the physics of explosions. Over tea, he joked to a colleague, "I could probably calculate the yield of a bomb just by looking at a photograph." The colleague bet him 50 pounds that he couldn't. So Taylor, being Taylor, went home and did exactly that, using publicly released images of the first U.S. atomic bomb test. His equations were so accurate that when his paper reached Washington, the government classified it immediately. They thought he was a spy. Taylor had accidentally revealed the secret power of the atomic bomb from a newspaper photo to win $50. He never got paid, but he did get interrogated. His official statement to the press years later was classic British understatement. The wager yielded interesting results, if not financial ones. Number 29. The explorer who bet he could find Atlantis. In 1882, American politician Ignatius Donnelly published a best-selling book claiming Atlantis was real and that he could prove it. He bet his publishers and investors that within a decade, he'd produce undeniable physical evidence. He even sold stock in his Atlantis Research Fund. He gathered fossils, maps, and myths, mixing just enough pseudoscience to sound convincing. For a while, he was treated like a visionary. But when real archaeologists debunked him, his investors wanted their money back. Instead of apologizing, Donnelly doubled down, publishing Atlantis, The Antediluvian World, Volume 2. It sold terribly. He died broke. But his bad bets sparked over a century of documentaries, conspiracy theories, and lost civilization YouTube channels. Atlantis was never found, but the grift, eternal. Number 30. The magician who bet he could survive his own trick. London, March 23, 1918. The Empire Theatre is packed, gas lamps glow, a smoky hush falls over 1,000 faces. They've come to see the impossible, a man catch a bullet with his bare hands. The performer strides onto the stage in full Chinese robes, his face painted pale, his expression unreadable. The posters call him Chungling Su, the marvel from Peking. But behind the exotic persona was an American named William Robinson, a quiet man who spoke no Chinese and barely smiled off stage. He wasn't born a magician, he'd built himself into one. Years of perfecting illusions, studying rivals, and hiding mistakes had made him a master of control. And tonight, he was about to gamble that control against death itself. The act was called The Condemned Man's Trick. Two assistants loaded a musket in front of the audience. Robinson caught the bullet on a metal plate hidden in his hand. A perfect illusion. He'd performed it more than 300 times. But backstage that evening, he made a fateful boast to a rival performer. "Tonight, I'll make it real. No smoke, no gimmicks, just nerve." His crew laughed it off until he reached for the gunpowder canister himself. He quietly removed the weak theatrical load and replaced it with a full live charge. It was meant to sound louder, look more dramatic, a small tweak, a big ego. When he stepped onto the stage, the crowd roared. He bowed slowly, raised the musket, and aimed it at himself. His own crewman holding the trigger. A blinding flash, a single crack, then silence. The audience gasped, then applauded. They thought the slump in his shoulders was part of the show, but his hands didn't rise this time. The assistant dropped the gun. Chungling Su, the great illusionist, the man who could not die, stumbled forward, clutching his chest. And then, breaking character for the first time in 19 years, he spoke in perfect English. "Oh my God, something's happened." He collapsed before the curtain hit the floor. The bullet had pierced his heart. When the truth came out that Chungling Su had been an American imposter all along, London was stunned. Newspapers called it the death of a ghost. He'd fooled the world, fooled death, and finally fooled himself. William Robinson's final act wasn't an illusion. It was irony in its purest form. He didn't just die on stage, he fulfilled his own illusion. Because when you make a career out of cheating death, the house always wins, and death always takes its bow last. Number 31. The president who bet on a shortcut. It's 1853. The world is being divided, mapped, and sold. And in Washington, U.S. President Franklin Pierce is trying to buy history. When explorers suggested building a transcontinental railroad, engineers argued over the route. Some wanted the northern path, some southern. Pierce, confident as ever, made a bet with his cabinet. We'll buy a shortcut and finish before anyone else. That shortcut was the Gadsden Purchase, a strip of Mexican desert so harsh even cacti gave up. Pierce spent $10 million on it, gambling that it would become the highway of the future. It didn't. The terrain was so brutal that construction crews quit halfway through. Temperatures hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The railroad never came. But the deal did bring something else. Decades of border disputes and one of the most useless stretches of land ever bought by a superpower. When reporters asked why he'd done it, Pierce supposedly replied, "Because I could." It remains the most expensive shortcut in American history. Proof that in politics, confidence is just gambling with better suits. Number 32. The man who bet he could disappear. In 1975, Australian businessman John Friedrich decided life was too boring for one identity. He faked his death, vanished, and reappeared under a new name. As the head of a multi-million-dollar construction company, he told colleagues he'd worked for the CIA, rescued hostages, and built top-secret tunnels. People believed him because he believed himself. One journalist joked that if John was lying, it was the best performance since Houdini. Then came the wager. At a corporate party, someone teased him about his mystery man past. John smirked and said, "I'll bet you $1 million I could disappear tomorrow and no one would find me." The next day, he did. He emptied the company accounts and fled into the Australian wilderness. Police chased him for weeks until he surrendered. Not because they caught him, but because he got lonely. During trial, when asked why he'd done it, he laughed and said, "Because they bet me I couldn't." A week before sentencing, he shot himself, leaving behind a note that read, "Call it even." He didn't just lose a bet. He became the ghost of his own legend. Number 33. The astronomer who bet the world would end. Our story ends where logic always does, with apocalypse. In 1910, when news spread that Halley's Comet was returning, the world lost its collective mind. Newspapers claimed its tail contained cyanogen gas, a deadly chemical that could poison the planet. Enter French astronomer Camille Flammarion, a respected scientist with a flair for drama. He made the ultimate bet with his colleagues. If the comet's tail sweeps the Earth, the gases will asphyxiate us all, and I'll die a proven genius. People panicked. Gas masks sold out. Some hid in cellars, others partied like it was Armageddon. One man even sold anti-comet pills. When the comet passed harmlessly overhead, Flammarion became the world's biggest meme. Rival scientists teased him for decades. He defended himself by saying, "At least I made people look up." He did. And in doing so, accidentally proved that fear sells faster than science. Every bet in this list had one thing in common. Someone thought they could outsmart reality. Kings gambled with oceans. Scientists gambled with atoms. Presidents gambled with maps. And every single time the house, the universe itself, is collected. But that's the thing about humans. We don't just take risks. We romanticize them. We dress them up as destiny, innovation, genius, and then act surprised when gravity, physics, or just plain stupidity smacks us in the face. Because deep down, we all love the thrill of maybe. Maybe I'll win. Maybe I'm right. Maybe this time the volcano won't erupt. But history is a casino with one rule. The odds never change. So the next time you hear someone say, "Trust me, I've got a sure thing," Remember? That's how half of civilization got its blooper reel. Factoland, reminding you that confidence built empires, lost fortunes, and occasionally drowned entire cities in beer. If you enjoyed this trip through human overconfidence, hit subscribe before someone bets they can survive without it.